Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at some incredibly cool battles from the Open Master League featuring a triple Shadow Legendary team. Shadow Mewtwo, Shadow Groudon, and Shadow Moltres. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Dero1, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now it goes without saying, this team definitely more of a team for fun than for climbing, considering there's a Shadow Moltres on the team, but this trainer is able to make magic finding these win cons out of thin air, and it leads to some extremely entertaining battles. Hopping into the first match, leading Shadow Mewtwo versus Dialga. This is a matchup where being the Shadow Mewtwo can have its advantages, as 2 Side Strikes plus the Psycho Cuts come very close to knocking out. Opponent, Overfarm is past the Iron Head, not throwing it right away. Side Strike will be no-shielded by the opponent, but now the Mewtwo is just going to throw the second Side Strike and win charge attack priority. So the opponent is forced to give up a shield early in the match, and Mewtwo is very happy to just let this through. Opponent will go for an undercharge. We're going to see a switch into the Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon potentially going to look for a 1-shield farm down, but the Dragon Breath is going to do a lot here. This is going to be tough. Shadow Groudon, these Dragon Breaths are tearing through its HP bar, but it's able to leave with 100 energy. Opponent sends in a Tapu Bulu, and this Tapu Bulu is not going to like Shadow Fire Punch. Normally, Tapu Bulu can survive 2 Fire Punches, but this is the Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon able to grab a shield. Tapu Bulu unable to get the farm down. Shadow Groudon on a rampage, picking up the knockout. What do they have in the back? It's a Solgaleo, and it's about to be completely destroyed by a Shadow Moltres. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. There's a big surprise in the lead in the next match. Shadow Mewtwo is going up against a Master League Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini, a Pokemon that is seen quite a bit in the Great League and the Ultra League, but we see why it's not seen in the Master League right there. Look at the Side Strike damage. Oh my goodness. Opponent will go for the Nature's Madness, and we see the Mewtwo completely unfazed, Psycho cutting down, exiting with energy. Oh no, in comes Dialga, Shadow Mewtwo with the Focus Blast. Dialga does respect it with a shield, but now Dialga is going to have to deal with Shadow Groudon, and this is not much better of a situation. Shadow Groudon, this is a very easy shield, as now you can just look to massively overfarm and put so much pressure on the opposing Dialga. Going straight for the Precipice Blades, no baits here. Precipice Blades does connect. Down goes Dialga in the back. Opponent has their own Mewtwo. Moltres farming up energy. Moltres is going to no-shield. Is the Side Strike going to be able to KO here? The Side Strike does not KO. Moltres going to be able to fire off the Overheat. And let's see this damage right here. Opponent, no shields. Get that Mewtwo off my screen. And that's game over. Moving to the next match, Shadow Mewtwo versus Landorus. A pretty good matchup for the Mewtwo just because there's identical pacing, but the Mewtwo can always win charge attack priority. The Mewtwo not throwing right away though, which is interesting, so potentially looking to try and bluff a potential Ice Beam. So going to build up to Ice Beam energy, opponent is going to respect it with a shield. Mewtwo continues to farm and now going to play to charge attack priority. This is a -1 Side Strike, but it will still do quite a lot of damage. Opponent is going to let that through. Could potentially go for a wing attack down with Moltres now, but instead looking to preserve the Mewtwo. Mewtwo looking for a farm down, can't quite get it. It's a simultaneous switch. Oh my goodness. Solgaleo is switched in at the same time as a Shadow Moltres. Opponent will go for the Psychic Fangs. Moltres going to look to overfarm and now go for the one-hit KO. Shadow Overheat. Do they shield? Yes, they do. They want to try and get rid of the Moltres, but here's the thing. Psychic Fangs, it'll come close to knocking out, but it doesn't quite. And the Moltres with 1 HP makes the Overheat. This Overheat is 2 stages debuffed, and it still almost picks up the one-hit KO onto the Solgaleo. My goodness. In comes the Groudon. Groudon gets the farm down. Opponent going to debuff with the Landorus. Landorus about to get Mudshot down unless they switch, and they send in Ho-Oh. Unfortunately, the energy on the Groudon is going to be debuffed here, but not anymore. We see the banking of the move, the switch into the Mewtwo, landing of the Side Strike, and now the Groudon can just click Precipice Blades and win charge attack priority over the Ho-Oh. Precipice Blades, single resisted, knocks Ho-Oh out of the sky, and there's the Fire Punch loaded as well. Fantastic energy management, resetting the debuff there, and the opponent just in absolute shambles thanks to these 3 Shadow Legendaries. Hopping into the next match, Shadow Mewtwo versus another Landorus, same leads as last game. Shadow Mewtwo very happy to stay in this matchup. Shadow Mewtwo goes for the side strike, but the opponent makes a beautiful catch, catching onto Lugia, and Lugia is a problem for this team, as the Shadow Mewtwo is not running Shadow Ball. Mewtwo going to stay in and bluff like it does have Shadow Ball. Does the opponent fall for it? They do. They will commit the shield. We now see the switch into the Shadow Moltres. Shadow Moltres, no shielding, calling a Sky Attack bait. Opponent does go for the Sky Attack. Thankfully, that will not be able to pick up the knockout. An Aeroblast would have been devastating. Speaking of devastating, it's the overheat into the Lugia. Barely does not pick up the KO. Lugia monstrously bulky, able to hang on and knock out the Moltres. Could potentially go for farm. Honestly, farm on either the Groudon or the Mewtwo is terrific here because both of them are going to be either resisted or double resisted. Back in comes the Landorus. Landorus will fire off the Sandshrew Storm. You have to shield this as the Mewtwo because you cannot afford to only have one Pokemon left and then just have the opponent continually apply debuffs and you have no ability to reset those debuffs. And now we're going to see Mewtwo firing off back-to-back Side Strikes. This is at -1, but it's a Shadow Side Strike. That does so much damage. Mewtwo going to commit the final shield. Mewtwo, I don't think can quite Psycho Cut down here. We actually see a simultaneous switch. Shadow Groudon going up against Zacian. Zacian going for the close combat. Close combat, gonna do some solid damage, but now the energy management here is perfect. Getting the absolute max possible farm with the Groudon. Precipice Blades picking up the KO and being able to make the Fire Punch. My goodness. The energy management, especially on the Groudon, has been absolutely terrific so far, and that's another win. Tough lead in the next match as Shadow Mewtwo leads into Giratina Origin. And Giratina is a pretty big problem for Moltres as well. Gonna send in the Moltres, but as we see, unfortunately, due to the nerf to Sky Attack that happened some seasons back, the pacing on Moltres is very, very rough here. Moltres is gonna farm up to the back-to-back Sky Attacks, and firing off Sky Attack number 1. Opponent is gonna no-shield. Moltres goes for Sky Attack number 2. Opponent makes a catch onto Togekiss. But here's the thing, Togekiss, these charms are gonna be resisted. So this is a bit of an interesting switch. This switch kind of makes me think that they are running Giratina Double Charm. And if that's the case, then Groudon could put in a massive amount of work in the endgame. Saving that Moltres for later, sending back in the Mewtwo. Mewtwo going to commit the shield, and Mewtwo will be able to massively overfarm, maybe even get the farm down, gets the farm down. That is an incredibly important farm down. This energy is so threatening, especially if it is going to be double charm. In comes the Giratina, and I don't see a sneak, so the opponent either got denied or it's charge attack priority. And it is going to be charge attack priority. Opponent will be able to fire off the Ominous Wind and pick up the KO here. They are able to pick up the KO, and now it's all up to Shadow Groudon in the Zero Shield with an ability to make a catch onto Moltres. Groudon farming up, and the catch onto the Moltres. Let's go. We call it out. It happens. Catching the move. Oh, it's Melmetal in the back. That is not a charmer, but Groudon is still very happy to see it. Precipice Blades, one-hit KO. In comes the Giratina, and Shadow Groudon. The rampage continues. Going for the Precipice Blades. Honestly, a Fire Punch would have KO'd there, but letting the opponent know that this game is definitively over. Shadow Mewtwo mirror in the next game. Opponent does not have Best Buddy boost on their Mewtwo, so they're always going to be losing charge attack priority. No Shadow Ball does make the mirror uncomfortable, but we do see Dero still build up on the first one and bluff it, and now just going to fire off the Side Strike since the opponent continues to overfarm. At this point, I honestly don't mind a no-shield. Just call the Side Strike bait. If they Shadow Ball, they Shadow Ball. But at the very least, now you can go for farm on one of your 2 Pokemon. Sending in the Moltres. Moltres could potentially try for a one-shield farm down here. I mean, the Mewtwo had a ton of residual energy. They Shadow Ball, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, as Side Strike is better neutrally, and that actually prevents them from getting to 2 moves. In comes Palkia, and Palkia is a massive issue for this backline. Going for the Sky Attack. That does a lot of damage to the Palkia, though. Trying to make another Sky Attack and barely being able to get there. The opponent over-farming a little bit, and they're just going to let the Palkia get KO'd, and it's Dialga in the back. Oh, no. The opponent trusting in the one-shield Dialga win con, and that's going to backfire in a massive way as Precipice Blades knocks out Dialga Origin and takes the win. Tough lead in the next match, Shadow Mewtwo versus Solgaleo. We see the safe switch going into the Shadow Moltres. Moltres going to be answered with Palkia, and Palkia will fire off the Aqua Tail and grab the shield from the Moltres. Moltres is going to return fire with multiple sky attacks. Interestingly enough, this Palkia is actually on Dragon Tail. We will see the shield from the Moltres. These Dragon Tails definitely adding up. Shadow Moltres not known for its bulk. Honestly, nothing on this team has a lot of bulk. Palkia is going to be able to get a farm down, which is quite uncomfortable, as they're going to be able to make a Spatial Rend versus whatever gets brought in here. In comes the Mewtwo. The opponent actually blind through. They blind through, and that means that this is only an Aqua Tail. They could have potentially survived the Psycho Cuts to make it to a Spatial Rend, but by blind throwing their energy, honestly, that potentially lets Dero back into the game. We will see the shield on the Psychic Fangs, and now the opponent is going to send in Xerneas, switching out, fearing a potential Shadow Ball, but now this can set up a win con. If the opponent decides to shield the Xerneas, then Shadow Groudon is back at shield parity, or if they let it go, then they have Solgaleo up a shield, but it's still against a Shadow Groudon, and that's not an amazing spot to be. Solgaleo going to go for the Psychic Fangs, Groudon massively overfarming, going for the Fire Punch bait. Even if it's no shielded, it's still going to do a ton of damage. This is a Shadow Groudon after all. Groudon is going to be able to make it to the last second charge attack here, and Precipice Blades will pick up the KO and take that game. Decent lead in the next match, Shadow Mewtwo versus Togekiss. Due to the Shadow bonus, Psystrike is able to put Togekiss into the red pretty instantly. So even though you are taking extra charm damage, I'd definitely rather be the Shadow Mewtwo in this particular matchup. Psystrike, that does so much damage. In comes the Shadow Moltres. Opponent is going to send in Dragonite, and Dragonite will be answered with the Sky Attack. Sky Attack not going to be able to knock out the Dragonite, but it will do a solid amount of damage. Dragonite firing off the Dragon Claw nearly instantly. If this is no shielded, the Dragonite could farm down, so Moltres is going to commit the shield. Moltres making it to Sky Attack number 2. Is the Dragonite willing to match shields, or are they going to concede switch advantage? They will match shields. Dragonite not wanting to risk the farm down, worried about the wing attack damage adding up, going for the Dragon Claw, but now this is going to set up the Mewtwo to get some very nice energy, as Mewtwo can now try and commit to the Psycho Cut farm down. Opponent not going to let that happen. They send in the Togekiss, and we see a switch to the Groudon as they fire off the Ancient Power. That's not going to do much of anything. Groudon is going to get a nice Mudshot farm down, exiting with energy, and the Dragonite's in a range where Fire Punch will definitely KO, and it's Rhyperior in the back. Oh no! The Groudon, just too deadly in these endgames. Opponent will fire off the Breaking Swipe as soon as they get it. We are going to see a shield on the Breaking Swipe. And, I mean, it's all over for the Rhyperior here. This is absolutely brutal. This Shadow Groudon on a rampage. Dragonite is going to get the farm down. Mewtwo has the Psystrike loaded. And the Triple Shadows, I mean, they're just absolutely taking names so far. Oh, my goodness. We've got another mirror lead in the next match, Shadow Mewtwo versus a regular Mewtwo. Opponent does have the best buddy badge, and they do have it equipped, which means that charge stack priority in this matchup is going to be a coin flip, and the first coin flip is going to be won by Dero. Faking a potential Shadow Ball, opponent is not going to commit the shield, and now Dero has a choice to make. Does he try and call back? We see the shield, and it is going to be the Shadow Ball, so that proves to be a very good shield. And now, the Shadow Mewtwo can threaten a knockout with a Psystrike, so if the opponent wants to land damage, they're going to have to commit the shield. Tough choice to make. Are you willing to double shield the lead? Letting it go. It's the Shadow Ball, and the opponent is able to win switch. In comes the Moltres. Moltres could potentially go for a one shield wing attack farm down, because exiting with energy here would be quite nice. Opponent goes for the Psystrike, but Mewtwo is going to faint right as they make Psystrike number 2. They send in a Melmetal. How is this the best response to 100 energy Moltres? The overheat does get shielded. Moltres farming up, and the catch onto the Shadow Groudon, saving the overheat for later, resetting the attack drop, catching the rock side where it does absolutely nothing. Opponent has Togekiss in the back, and this game looks very, very winnable. Shadow Groudon up energy, going to be able to start spamming out these Fire Punches, and the Fire Punches, even though they do not get same type attack bonus, do actually add up due to that extra damage from being a Shadow. So now Groudon is going to look to overfarm as much as it can, hoping against hope that this Fire Punch will KO. The Fire Punch does pick up the knockout. In comes the Melmetal. Melmetal is forced to throw energy here, and this means it's overheat time. The Rock Slide picks up the KO, but they do not have the back-to-back moves. They shielded the first overheat, but they ran out of shields. Overheat number 2 connects, and Melmetal gets absolutely flame cooked. Oh my. Hopping into the final match, Shadow Mewtwo versus Palkia. This Palkia is on the standard Dragon Breath. Mewtwo looking to farm up. The opponent not quite at enough energy for a Spatial Rend, so we are going to see a shield on the Aqua Tail. Mewtwo going for a Focus Blast here. Side Strike will not KO. Focus Blast will do slightly more raw damage. Opponent is going to let it through, and Focus Blast is enough to pick up the KO. In comes the Dialga. We see the pivot into the Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon. I actually do like the bait here. Normally, I'm not a big fan of baiting in the Dialga matchup, but since you're down a shield, baiting can help get back a better sense of energy parity. And Groudon just going to let this through. Iron Head will connect. That does quite a lot of damage. Groudon only going to make the Fire Punch. How well was the opponent counting? Honestly, even a Shadow Fire Punch is pretty threatening, so the opponent is going to double shield, and this can potentially set up Shadow Moltres up a shield to put in some work in the end game. In comes the Moltres. Moltres going to try and make it to the overheat. Getting to the overheat, and that's going to be goodbye to the Dialga. As overheat, I mean, it's neutral, but that Dialga is no more. In the back, it's going to be a purified Mewtwo, and the catch. Oh my goodness, resetting the debuff as well. And Mewtwo enjoyers, look away, because this Mewtwo is about to get absolutely burned. Oh goodness, overheat connects, goodbye Mewtwo, and that is a good game. All in all, these were some extremely entertaining battles in the Master League. Running 3 Shadow Pokemon in a league where stat products are at their absolute highest requires a tremendous amount of skill, as oftentimes you're going to go up against teams that have way more bulk than you, and you really have to rely on very precise energy management and those catches, which we saw again and again, to be able to pull out win cons. So, definite thank you for submitting these battles. I know currently, at the time I'm posting this, Catch Cup is out. I'm not a massive fan of Catch Cup, so I'm going to be focusing more on shoutcasts from the more standard leagues like Great League, Ultra League, and Master League. And man, starting off the Catch Cup week with a bang here. Oh my goodness. That was a tremendously fun set of battles to watch. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.